The Niagara Region has an active group of amateur radio operators meeting under the umbrella of the NPARC. Ken Gansel joins us. And Ken, can I still call them ham operators,
Yes,
ham radios?
Yeah, that's fine. Amateur radio operator, ham operator.
What does ham stand for?
That is a terminology that came out of the really early 1900s, just after Marconi made his first transatlantic communications. Then all of a sudden, especially in the UK, people started building their own radios, which were simple devices, but a number of magazines flourished at that time with full sets of instructions. So that's where the sort of a terminology came from. The actual meaning of it, I don't have that answer.
Driving around, sometimes I'll be behind a car with a license plate, definitely personalized, but it starts with a VA and a number of numbers. That probably signifies that that person is an amateur radio enthusiast.
That probably stimulates that he's actually licensed.
Right.
Rather than, and then obviously an enthusiast, but he's licensed. You can't stick that on a license plate unless when you send to the MTO, they ask for a copy of your license.
Okay, so it's really kind of a legal issue.
Oh yes, and everybody who's a member of our club is a licensed hand operator, which means that they went through the licensing process with the federal government, because amateur radio is controlled by the federal government.
And is it through the CRTC, like regular radio stations?
They changed their name quite often, but it originally was Communications Canada. Now it's Industry Science, and I can't think of the last one.
How many members do you have in the Niagara Club?
We have 45 at the moment. According to Communications Canada, I'll use the old name, there's 750 licensed amateur radio operators in the Niagara region. In Canada right now, there's probably somewhere between 75 and 80,000 amateur radio operators. The numbers are going up. Just the rule of thumb, it would appear that they're gaining somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 a year.
You've been doing this since you were 14 years old. We're not going to say how many years.
That's a long time.
Unless you want to.
No.
But do you mind if I just want to grab this? So I'm looking at this, and you say, like, this isn't what I would think would be a fully functioning ham radio, but you're saying it is.
Fully functional, and also has the capability of being digital.
So you've seen things progress through many decades.
I was a tube guy.
Yeah.
I built radios, Heath kits.
Like, I think of ham radios as these giant sets, a big set of headphones on there, and like this thing would take up almost your entire table.
Yeah, they did at the time, but not anymore. And this has the capability of frequencies in what is known as the VHF range, which is the 142, 146 range, and also the upper HF frequencies, which is 460 megahertz and things of that. Your cell phone is an actual radio in the 800 megahertz to 1.6 gigahertz range. So, and a cell phone, again, is actually smaller than that.
Exactly.
With amazing amount of capabilities, but what it has is a lower power. This is usually 5 watts.
Right.
Whereas a cell phone is usually under a watt or just around a watt. So this has the capability of much greater range. It is not an overseas radio per se. So if you want to do what we call HF, the higher frequencies, and talk to England or Europe, or participate in emergencies such as the earthquake in Haiti, things of that nature, then your radio is a little bit bigger. No tubes, solid state, but usually anywhere between 100 watts and 1,000 watts.
Now you bring up the idea of emergencies, and one of the reasons we invited you on today is because your club is helping the community emergency response team with your expertise.
The region of Niagara is created the CERT, the Civilian Emergency Response Team, which is probably the first one in Canada from what we can tell. I think the federal government is very interested in sort of the blueprint of what's being done here, and are looking at that with Bill Blair as the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, taking that model across Canada. So they have probably 100 people, I think, right now that are trained up for the services that they want to provide. So what we do is we run the amateur radio equipment, which we have installed on their behalf in the CERT vehicle. So there's a vehicle that they have designated, and we've wired it and we set it up to be able to support not only this local repeaters, but also the HF band. So in the event that we were dealing with an emergency that basically took out a huge infrastructure, like I'll say half of Canada, for example. Yeah, then you string up the 100-foot wire between two trees, run a piece of coax cable to the back of a unit, and you're on the air.
You've been doing this for years. You actually installed the system in 1978 for the Niagara Regional Police.
I was part of the project team that worked with a contractor that put in the radio equipment. Our job was to go around and basically test all that installed equipment. So it was myself and two other members of the team were actually ham radio operators. One gentleman, he just passed away recently, VE3COP.
Right.
So, and the other thing too in the club, you'll hear their name on the radio.
But you know them by...
You'll know them by call signs.
Yes. That's interesting.
It's sort of an uncanny thing, but that's sort of the nature of the beast.
Ken, your club just celebrated a big milestone.
We are in our 75th year of operation. Started in the early fall of 1948 with probably about 100 members. At one time there was another club in the Welland area that merged with the Niagara Club, which was Niagara Falls, St. Catharines area. And probably a couple of years later, a Port Colborne Club merged in. So that formed NPARC, or the Niagara Peninsula Amateur Radio Club. So we're very proud of doing 75. I always, at the beginning of this, thought, oh, wow, this is great. We're probably one of the first in Canada. No. London, Ontario is, I think, 102 years. And we believe that the Amateur Radio Club in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, may be the oldest in Canada. A lot of the clubs were formed at the end of World War I because people were trained in Morse code.
Communications, yeah.
Communications, and that carried over into their non-military life, and that's where these clubs started. Our club in 48 to some extent was towards the end, well, certainly past World War II, but it started with a lot of people that were interested in building radios with tubes and putting things together. And there was a lot of experimentation. I mean, this was all very, very brand new, and there was very few actual manufactured radios. There were components that were sent to you in a box, and you wired them together based on somatics, which is what I did even when I was 14.
Congratulations on that 75th anniversary, Ken. It's
Thank
a
you.
big milestone for the club to reach.
And we're also hoping that more folks in the Niagara region will join our club and participate in our weekly communications nets and our other monthly events. We meet once a month for training and education. So thank you.
Thank you.